you look at the market reports, right? You have BCG saying that RWA will be a 16 trillion market by 2030. I'm sure it's not just private credit or T-bills, even though T-bills today takes the huge majority. I think we're more than 10 billion in yield bearing stable coins that are getting yield from T-bill token.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 52 of Colors of Web3 and Entrepreneurship. My name is Lam, your Web3 host. For those of you who are new to the show, Colors of Web3 and Entrepreneurship is a show highlighting the journeys of builders and innovators in Web3 and entrepreneurship. Some topics, especially in Web3, may get technical, but we do our best to keep it accessible for most people. Here today, I'm joined by Wilbert Johan. He's the BD ecosystem team at Pendle Finance. Wilbert, can you give a quick introduction by yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lam. So I'm Wilbert. I'm part of the ecosystem BD team at Pendle. And just a quick intro to Pendle before I think we will dive in more in depth later. But for now, what Pendle is essentially is a yield tokenization protocol and a marketplace for yield trading.
Cool, nice. Yeah, so I think probably many people will be curious about your professional background before you joined Pendle. So feel free to pick a point in time, maybe from when you went to college or up until the current present day, and maybe talk a bit more about your professional background.
Yeah, so I joined the Web3 space in 2020 DeFi Summer when LP yields were like triple digit, sometimes even a few thousand APY. But none of those yields were really sustainable. So, but I was part of that, that period of time where you had really juicy LP APY, and a lot of people would just farm those yields for a couple of days and then move on to the next farm. And that actually ties in really well with joining Pendle, because Pendle's original inspiration was to provide fixed rates on variable yields in DeFi. So that was my original, the original start of my journey in Web3. But actually, I went on to start up my own Web3 startup, also in the space of Web3, which is working on Web3 rewards tokenization platform. Essentially, we were trying to revolutionize retail experiences through NFT and blockchain technology. So I was working on that for about 1 or 2 years. The market wasn't the best. And then in between that, I was consulting for a couple of projects in DeFi and NFT. In the space of DeFi, I worked with some projects in the DeFi option vaults category as well. Essentially, where this projects would sell covered calls on BTC and ETH and return the premium from the options to users as yield. But obviously, if you looked at the market in 2022, again, very sideways, non-volatile market, and options can't survive in that market environment. So yeah, unfortunately, it didn't really take off as well. And then prior to joining Pendle, I was actually part of RWA protocol, leading strategy at the RWA protocol. It was based in Singapore. It was an RWA protocol that was working on private credit tokenization, which also ties in really well with what I do at Pendle currently. I'm heading DeFi integrations at Pendle, part of the BD ecosystem team. There's about 4 or 5 of us. But my main domain is mainly looking at RWA, stable coins, yield-bearing stable coins, but also covering other verticals such as ETH restaking, BTC restaking, and of course, looking at other narratives as well.
Cool. Wow. So there's so many things that you have done, right? So I think you joined during the DeFi Summer 2020. I think that was also the same time that I also kind of really deep dive into Web3 around, the DeFi Summer. And then, yeah, like you said, saw maybe 100% or maybe 1,000. Sometimes I actually even remember, I even remember seeing like million APY. Yeah. At that time, there's like one was like a billion or so. Yeah. But,
yeah.
Obviously, that wasn't really sustainable, right? And then, we all knew it. That was quite a very interesting time for DeFi, I would say, really booming. And then you said, you also work for you build your own like company, right? Web3 rewards tokenization.
Yeah.
So how did that work? What problem were you trying to solve?
Yeah, it was interesting. So after DeFi Summer in 2020, I got into the whole NFT bandwagon. I was a huge believer of NFTs. I still am today. I just think the market isn't the best, but I think the value proposition of NFTs is around providing utility and membership access to specific communities. You see a lot of good projects like Apache Penguin nowadays. I think apes are still very much relevant, just that the market again may not be valuing NFTs as much as the other verticals today. But apart from that, yeah, I really saw the value in NFTs. And one day I had a friend. He hit me up. He was like, "Hey, Wilbert, I've got a family friend who's working on an F&B business, and they want to dive into Web3." I was like, "Okay, connect me." We had a call. We were discussing some ideas. So they were working on. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but they were working on this ready to eat meals in Singapore.
Oh,
They had a lot of vending machines
yeah.
selling this ready to eat meals, and they were trying to see how they could integrate Web3. So I pitched them the idea of possibly integrating NFTs to create a membership program around their brand, and also because they have an existing community of loyal followers and customer base. So I think that ties in really well. And the value proposition of NFTs there again is to create a membership access. But a lot of people ask, why can't you do this in Web2, right? So I think the main idea there is that with Web3s, you have a platform where rewards and membership is not tied to a specific brand, but a possibility of being able to exchange the membership. Let's say if you no longer want to be part of that brand anymore, you could exchange for example, your Starbucks NFT loyalty rewards card with maybe a Nike loyalty rewards card on the blockchain in a permissionless manner. So I think that was really interesting for me. And then at that point, I was asking my friend, "Hey, there is actually a pretty big gap in terms of Web2 brands that are trying to enter the Web3 space, but at the same time, not enough information to go around in terms of how do you access Web3 markets, right? And how do you integrate NFTs into your brand to build a community around that?" So I think at the same time, during that period of time, 2021, 2022, at the hype of the whole NFT cycle, I also spent a lot of time in Discord servers, in voice chats and Twitter. And I think I saw the value and the importance of community and users, which is something that is still very relevant in today's context, whether you're building a DeFi project or a Web3 project. I think your users and the community is the number one stakeholder that you have to actually be prioritizing, right? Even for a panel, we do listen very much to our users. Yeah, so that was the whole story with the startup that I was working on. But yeah, at some point, I realized that we didn't have the resources to continue
Hmm.
moving forward with the project, so I decided to call it off.
I see. Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah. Was it because like it
Yeah,
was quite human intensive, resource intensive, as in, or was it like
yeah.
technological barrier? What was the main challenge you faced back then?
So that was actually in the final year of my university, right?
I
So
see.
I got together a tech guy who is currently working at one of the top crypto exchanges, software
Nice.
engineer. So smart guy. The guy that hooked me up with the friend who was running the F&B business was a marketing guy. So he
Hmm.
was heading marketing. I also had a creative director on board. So it was four of us, including myself. And we were, going around pitching to investors, and we actually did receive a couple of angel offers. And for university students, it's a very interesting, exciting prospect to be receiving offers for a business idea that you have. And you think about it, and like all you have is just like a slide deck and an idea, and you
Yeah.
have somebody who's willing to take a bet on you. I think that is something that well, on the context of entrepreneurship, which is I think very relevant to your podcast, Lab,
Yeah.
is something that is very inspiring for I think younger entrepreneurs as well. The validation of seeing somebody who wants to take a bet on your idea and who's willing to put money on the line. That being said, I think a lot of entrepreneurs also get disheartened whenever they go on their fundraising journey and they get rejected. I've been through, I think, my fair share of fundraising for my own startup, and also when I was working for the RWA project to help them raise a pre-seed round. And what I would say is that, it's all part of a journey, right? Like when investors say no, it could mean that it's no now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's no forever, right? In the future, there could always be a possibility of you working with those investors. But, more importantly, to see it in a positive light, to see what was it, in terms of um, what was it that they didn't like about your project. So instead of taking it as like a rejection, right, I would say to see it as sort of like a feedback session to improve your product and to built on your brand. So yeah, that is something that I really learned from the whole startup journey as well as fundraising journey.
Interesting. Yeah, for sure. I think for every startup entrepreneur journey, there's all like a lesson to learn, right? Regardless whether you win or
Yeah,
you fail, right? But of course, I think like probably 90% of like small businesses probably just fail, right, in first couple of years. So I think that's quite typical, and it's not a sign that you're like that it was your fault or something. Maybe it was just wrong product
yeah.
market fit, maybe wrong
Timing
timing. There's so
matters a
many.
lot as well.
Mm,
Yeah.
also that too, yeah, for sure. Interesting. And then you said after you went on to work for like an RWA protocol, right?
Yeah,
Wilbert
so
Johan.
before the RWA project, I was just consulting for a couple of NFT projects
Hmm.
on tokenomics, as well as a couple of DeFi projects I was saying earlier. One of them was a DeFi option vault, where essentially DeFi users can stake Bitcoin or ETH, and then they would sell call options on Bitcoin or ETH, essentially covered calls, right? And then the premium will be returned back to the vault as yield. I think when the markets are volatile, you could earn anywhere between 30 to 50% APY in those time. But then if you look back at the market for up in 2022 after the whole Luna FTX thing happened, the market was really sideways, right? There was no volatility. So it was really bad for any project that was working on options. Yeah, and after that, I transitioned to the RWA project to lead strategy. Yeah, so that was the timeline.
Cool. Ah, I see. I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Strategy. So for like RWA, I remember there's another guest on my podcast. It's been a few episodes ago. Actually, many
Syrup,
episodes ago. Like no, it's a Trevor
maple.
Coverico. No,
Oh,
not him, but it's Trevor Coverico. Actually, he's like a serial. I will put leave a link up here for if you want to see it later. But yeah, he's like a serial entrepreneur as well. He said that back in like 2016 or something, I think RWA wasn't even a name, wasn't even a thing, And then like fast forward like 7 years later, or like 7, 8 years later when he came on my podcast, RWA now is like widely recognized, right? And people really recognize the value of it. But I think back when he was already working on it, it was still like very much like non-existent thing. There was no infra, there was no concept, there was like not a lot of things going on around it. Yeah, interesting. So when you were leading like strategy for that project, then what sort of thing did you come up with? I mean, feel free to share whatever that was that you can share publicly.
yeah. So I won't go into the name of the project because I'm not sure if
Yeah.
they're comfortable with me
Oh, good. No,
name
I totally
dropping them.
understand. Yeah, I
But
totally understand.
yeah, they what I can say is that they're a pretty big private credit company in Singapore, and they started a essentially a blockchain arm, which was a separate independent entity that was trying to connect DeFi investors with private credit, right? So uh, I joined them really early stages when I was like the third hire of the team, and we essentially were pre-seed, right? So I helped them with the whole pre-seed fundraising round, pitching to investors, ideating and designing the product as well. So that was the whole journey for the RWA project. I was there for close to 2 years before joining Pendle. But yeah, at the same time, I see a huge potential in RWA, which is why even today at Pendle, I would say I'm like sort of like the unofficial RWA guy. So
I see.
yeah, and there's been a couple of exciting integrations for Pendle on the RWA side, which I'll share a bit more later. But I think for the RWA project that I was at, you look at the market reports, right? You have
Hmm.
BCG saying that RWA will be a 16 trillion market by
Yeah.
2030. I'm sure it's
Huge.
not just private credit or T bills, even though T bills today takes the huge majority. I think we're more than 10 billion in yield bearing stable coins that are getting yield from T bill tokens. So
Yeah.
now you even have brands like BlackRock, Biddle Fund, right?
Hmm.
The BUIDL Biddle Fund, and Ondo Finance, right? So a couple of them that are working on this yield bearing stable coins that are getting yield from RWA sources such as US Treasury bills.
Cool. Interesting. When you said like private credit, can you maybe explain for people who may not be familiar with the concept? What does it mean, like private
Yeah,
credit?
yeah. Essentially, the company was providing loans to non-bank financial lenders in Southeast Asia, emerging markets in Southeast Asia. So what non-bank financial lenders are essentially is that they are the wholesale lenders when they are providing loans to the end users. So end users are people like you and I that let's say take on loans, consumer loans. They could be SMEs that are taking on business loans, different kind of and loans. But the NBFIs, or what we call non-bank financial lenders, they need to scale their lending activities, and the way that they get capital is by taking on capital from institutions like the TradFi firm that I was working at. And the reason for that is because a lot of this NBFI, non-bank financial institutions, they do not have the bank license to take on customer bank deposits like how a bank would be able to do. A bank takes on your money and they do loans with that. But a lot of these NBFIs they don't have the banking license. So what they do is that they have to approach bigger financial institutions to take on a loan. And usually this could be anywhere between 12 to 24 months in tenure, and a lot of different factors that would affect the pricing of the loans, in terms of the interest rates, right? Things like, what is the profile of the borrower, and what is the tenure of the loan. Different things would affect the pricing. So essentially, the institution that I was working at were trying to provide DeFi investors with this kind of like 10 to 20% fixed yields, because I think they also saw an issue with variable yields in DeFi. So they were trying to plug a gap in DeFi, which was to provide fixed yields. But we also learned a lot from that whole process. I think if you look at the market today, investors still prefer to be in liquid investments. I think that is something that is still true even for something in the past few years, right? Investors always prefer to have liquidity lying around, so in case there are opportunities they could deploy anytime. So the prospect of getting investors to lock in funds for anywhere between 12 to 24 months, even in DeFi, seems like a long time. But actually in TradFi, it's not that long of a time, right? In TradFi, you
true.
have loans that are even 3 to 5 years or even 10 years kind of time. So I think, so essentially there was a mismatch in terms of what DeFi investors were looking for, as well as what RWA projects that are trying to provide private credit can offer them. So I think they're still very much relevant, but the target audience is slightly different. I don't think they would be your average DeFi degen. They would be more of your institutional crypto investors that could perhaps earn passive yield on their treasury. Yeah, so I think that is the main takeaway from the whole journey that I went through at the RWA project.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's all very interesting. So basically, these non-bank financial lender, like you said, right? They wanted to lend our money to end user, like maybe you and I, maybe for what, like purchasing. I'm guessing purchasing. Is it for
Yes.
purchase a house, purchase a car, or something, or maybe something else?
Yeah, different purposes, right? It could even
Mm,
be education loans. It could be
I see.
agriculture loans.
Mm,
So different borrowers, right? Like it could be consumer loans for whatever reason.
I see. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So what? I guess these would be like medium to medium level in interest rate, right?
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
think it would
makes
be
sense.
higher than definitely your US Treasury bills,
I see.
because there is an element of default risk when we're talking about private credit or loans in general. And also, you have to study what the underlying collateral is, right? If the underlying collateral is some, motorcycles in some country like Africa, maybe the quality of the loan may not be as high as, let's
Yeah.
say, a secured loan that is collateralized by cash in Singapore, right? So I think that is something that is taken into account as well. Other factors that we look at is the size of the total outstanding loan book of this different borrowers, and BFIs that are trying to borrow money from this larger financial institutions, like one of the ones that
Mm,
I was working at. So we look at how much is their total outstanding loan book, how many loans have they facilitated, things like default ratio, right? Things like cohort yields. What are the kind of yields, right, that we're looking at in terms of repayments as well. So those are the things that we look at. So the different kind of factors that we use to assess the health of the loans. But the RWA project that I was working at, again, not sure if I
mm,
should name drop them because I think they may not be comfortable, but they were working on a credit analytics platform. So essentially using credit analytics to analyze the
mm.
health of these loans, trying to insert an element of data analytics and machine learning into the whole loan analysis process.
Interesting. So it's kind of like I think there's a few of those like loan platform in Web2 that I've seen.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like lending. I forgot
So,
the name. It's like in the
yeah.
US, right? There's a few
Uh-huh.
like Casper or Casper something like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
they also like just lending to people. Interesting. And then they can also, I mean, since it's like a platform, they can also do the credit analysis, which makes sense. Cool. Yeah, fascinating. Cool. So before we deep dive into your company,
Yeah.
just one fun question. Can you share with us what you do in your free time? What are your hobbies?
Wow. I think being in crypto for, what is it now, 4 years? Um, I think it's part of your life, right? Like, I think a lot of people that I know, my friends that are in crypto, you're either really tired of it or it really is just part of your life and you're just really passionate about the space. For me, I think I'm somewhere in between where,
Hmm.
um, you know, outside of work, I do my, my own investments and research on different verticals and crypto, on Web3 in general. Outside of Web3, I have taken up a recent hobby in running. I'm
Nice.
trying to prepare for a half marathon
Oh, nice.
happening in
Yeah.
December.
Oh,
So
cool.
that's been interesting for me. And I think, yeah, I've honestly been neglecting exercise quite a bit for the past
Hmm.
2 to 3 years, unfortunately. But it helped me understand the importance of exercising and just the importance of exercise and how it ties in with your ability to focus on task again. Sometimes when you don't exercise, you don't get out there and move your body, you get
Yeah.
really restless, right? And it's hard for you to focus on work. Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, for me, like I usually exercise just to keep healthy, right? Stay healthy, but also I think like feel energetic as well. Running, I don't think. I mean, in the future, I'm talking maybe
Yeah.
long future. I'll probably try to do a marathon or maybe an Ironman. But right now, I feel like
Wow.
I don't have the capacity to train for even a half marathon. It's actually
Yeah.
quite hard, you know. It's actually quite hard. So actually, the other day, actually, it's just like a couple of weeks ago, I was just running with a friend, and I think we run 12 kilometers. For me, it's
Wow.
actually quite long already, to be honest. 12 kilometers, 14. I think that's usually like my limit. And then it made me realize that okay, this is actually really gonna be really hard to try to run it in one go, you know, without like walking, you know. I run one go because eventually I guess like your feet become like so fatigued or something, and then become like blister, and then but I there's a point where it's like become a mental game, right? It's like your mind is you have to your mind can keep, if your mind give up, then you will give up, but if your mind keep moving, then your body is just like kind of dragging along even despite
Yeah,
of the
it's
pain.
a
Yeah.
I think preparing for a half marathon it's a proper almost like a full-time job like you said.
Yeah.
And it is a mental game, right? Like and some people say, just dissociate your mind from your body and keep running. Don't pretend like you don't have a brain. So you just focus on your next target, like aim for a tree or something and run towards it, and then you aim for your next target. I think that's a really good way of I would say, partitioning things. And
Hmm.
also it's a good way to get your mind off things, especially with crypto. We always talk about touching grass, right? I think it's a serious thing that has to
Yeah.
be talked about. A lot of people in Web3 and crypto that I know have high stress as well. I mean, the
Yeah.
whole environment is high stress, right? You're dealing with extreme volatilities. You're dealing with potentially rug pulls
Yeah.
every other day. So it's really important we do get out there and just dissociate ourselves from the whole thing once in a while.
It's true. Yeah, I also agree with that. And sometimes just connect, hang out with like Web 2 people who don't know anything about Web 3, you know, just so that you can like take a break from that. Yeah, cool. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and deep dive into your company. Feel free to share any presentation or website of your company by sharing about it. And maybe it would be interesting
Yeah.
if you can share the history or I mean, if you're, of the company, if you know about it as well.
Yeah, so Pendle was started, I think 2021, 2020 thereabouts. But initially it was the Pendle V1, right? What you see today is Pendle V2, which is
Hmm,
a very different version from Pendle V1. I don't have the full details of Pendle V1, but essentially
I see.
today's version of Pendle is Pendle V2, where the idea is that you can take any yield bearing asset in DeFi, that is a ERC20 token, bring it to Pendle, and we can tokenize it into PT and YT. So PT stands for principal tokens. It's
Hmm,
redeemable at maturity for a fixed interest, right? It's
I
like
see.
buying a discount bond, a zero coupon discount bond. And for YTs, which actually stands for yield tokens, you're getting leverage yield exposure as well as leverage points exposure to the underlying asset. So I'll give you an example. I think this year, a lot of the traction that Pendle has had has came from ETH restaking. I think we're
Hmm,
trying to replicate the same success with BTC-Fi, which I'll touch on in a bit. But
Yeah.
I think for ETH restaking, it was really novel, right? You had this whole concept of eigenlayer coming out to essentially where you could restake your ETH LST, and then any other AVSs, or what we AVS stands for actively validated services, essentially networks, or they could be oracles, they could be chains that want to utilize the pool ETH on EigenLayer can do that and just pay EigenLayer a fee instead of having to create your own token and to bootstrap your own nodes for your own chain or your own oracle, with whatever product it is that you're developing that requires decentralized consensus. So that is something that I think EigenLayer has really innovated. And the way that it tied in with Pendle is that usually if you were to stake your ETH LST, mainly STE, right? From Lido,
Yeah.
stake ETH on Lido, and you bring it to EigenLayer and you deposit there. It's locked. It's not liquid, right? So you had this whole rise of ETH LRTs, or restaking tokens, right? That would essentially make your deposits into EigenLayer liquid. And the way that it ties in with Pendle is that you can then bring those ETH LRTs, for example, EtherFi EETH onto Pendle, and we can tokenize it into the PT and YT that I was talking to you about. So users can choose to trade the yield of these tokens independently by purchasing the YTs, which again gives you leverage yield exposure. And for projects that are doing any kind of points, usually that goes to the YTs as well. So if you buy PT, which is a principal token, you don't get any interim yield, you don't get any interim points. You're only getting a fixed interest at maturity. Again, PT and YT, they are liquid. You can sell it anytime. But if you want to lock in the fixed yield at time of purchase, then you should hold it till maturity.
I
Yeah,
see.
that's
Cool. So
a
for every token, I guess you deposit into
yes.
your platform, right? It will be like
Hmm.
separate into like two token, right? One is like the
Correct.
PT you said principal token, like, which get only fixed interest, right? And then the other one, the
Yes,
U token, get points and maybe some other benefit. Is that right?
correct.
Oh, cool. Hmm. Interesting. So, yeah. So I mean, yeah, feel free to talk and share more about your main product. I think you said
Yeah.
V2, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. So the current version is Pendle V2. We are actually working on a V3, which maybe I might share more later. We don't
Sure.
have a lot of details to share for now, but the idea is that V3 will be out possibly in Q1 next year. Think of it as a futures platform for yield trading. But I think I'll touch a bit more on Pendle V2, which is what I think most of our community and most of our users are familiar with, right? So Pendle V2 is again the current product today, the one that I was sharing earlier, that allows you to bring in any assets that are supported on Pendle, and it tokenizes into PT and YT. Yeah, just for
Okay.
now, just to give a high level overview, right? So
Good idea.
for PT and YT, essentially, I think the main users or target audience for PT is anyone that doesn't want to deal with the variability of the yield. Again, we talk about the genesis of Pendle, which is from 2020 DeFi Summer, around the time you and I joined the space lab. Essentially, we were
Yeah.
looking at unsustainably high yields of triple digits, like you said, even a few million percent APY, but none of those
Yeah.
yields were really sustainable. So I think Pendle was born with the vision of trying to provide a fixed yield on any of these yield bearing assets. Obviously, there are a lot of criteria that we look at whenever we support an asset on Pendle. It's very much still a process that we go through to analyze which asset should be supported on Pendle. Again, we want to only associate Pendle with high quality projects that have good underlying liquidity, so our users can enter and exit anytime. So I think when it comes to principal tokens or PTs, the main target audience would be whales or institutional users again that prefer to just earn a fixed yield, but they don't care about the points or if the yield goes up, they're fine with that, right? Mainly they're trying to lock in a yield. So I think the way I would compare it essentially is that Pendle is similar to what you have in traditional finance called interest rate swaps, right? Where you're trading a variable yield stream for a fixed yield stream. So essentially with PTs, you are locking in a fixed yield on the variable yield stream. And for YTs, it's similar to locking in a variable yield stream in exchange for the fixed rates, right? So that is something that is, I would say, parallel to what we're trying to build for the whole of DeFi. There is no such infrastructure on DeFi. I think that there are a couple of other projects, but Pendle, when you talk about yield tokenization, I think it is the category leader when it comes to providing fixed rate markets as well as durable yield markets. In June earlier, we picked at about 7 billion in TVL.
Wow.
We were top 5 DeFi protocol. So yeah, I think that was a huge achievement for Pendle because we went from a protocol that was less than 1 billion in TVL at the start of the year to 7 billion. It has came down, sorry, it has came down quite a bit because again, market factors as well as the nature of Pendle because a lot of the pools have maturity dates. So they're not perpetual pools for now. A lot of the pools have specific maturity dates. So we had a huge maturity event that was that occurred sometime in July. So TVL is still, I think, very healthy now, close to 3 billion. And trading volumes are, again, also very healthy, I think, between the range of 50 to 100 million on an average day.
That's huge number. Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
you said like at the top in one point was like 7 billion, right? And then has come down quite a bit. Interesting. So what are some of the bigger pools in there? You can
Yeah,
share
I
the
think one
name.
of maybe I'll share my screen at this point just to go
Sure.
through a little bit about the platform.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so I think just introduction to Pendle, right? So again, there are three things that you could be doing, right? Again, you could be purchasing PTs, right? Which is the fixed rate tokens, right? Essentially, if you purchase PTs and you hold it to maturity, you're getting a fixed rate on whatever is the denominated asset. It could be stablecoin denominated, like this usual USD 0++ pool. It could be denominated in ETH, right? We have a lot of ETH, LST and LRT pools on Pendle as well. And recently we introduced BTC-Fi on Pendle. And just to give a quick introduction of what BTC-Fi is, if you look at Bitcoin, traditionally you can't stake Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin itself is non-programmable, right? Bitcoin chain itself is non-programmable. There's no real yield on Bitcoin. If you look at, WBTC that is sitting on EVM networks, most of it is held on Aave. And the number one utility for Bitcoin that I would say is that people are using it to borrow other tokens
Yeah,
again so that they can do other DeFi stuff, right?
that's true.
And there were some recent changes in terms of the custody of WBTC, and there was a lot of discussion around that. But even then, you still have close to, I think last I checked, 2.5 billion thereabouts of WBTC on this money market such as Aave. And the yield is like 0.03% or 0.01%, right? So it's very low percentage and people don't really care for that yield. I think the number one reason why people hold BTC is because they just want exposure to the asset and they're not really interested in taking a lot of smart contract risks, which is something
Yeah,
that we do acknowledge internally at Pendle. And we have been having discussions in terms of refining our approach because we do acknowledge that the approach has to be somewhat different from the approach that we took with ETH LRTs. It's a different ballgame because you're talking about ETH holders against more risk averse institutional Bitcoin whales, right? And a lot of this Bitcoin is concentrated, I would say, in the hands of a few key players. You have this, a lot of this Bitcoin miners that are mainly Chinese based as well. So again, different approach that has to be taken. Yeah. So if I can just go through the platform,
sure.
um, yeah, so again, we have, ETH denominated yield. So at the end of the day, if you purchase like a PT on Renzo Easy ETH, right, you get more Easy ETH back. So again, a lot of these yields are denominated in, assets such as BTC, ETH, and even stable coins, right? So it caters to different audiences, right? Even for BTC today, you can get, 7% on the Solve BTC. And that's something that is really novel, I think, and innovative that Pendle has done. So we actually just hit 600 million in TVL on all our BTC-Fi pools on Pendle.
Wow.
Yeah, we've only launched for about 2 months. So I think that is something that is a pretty big achievement. Internally, we're very happy as well, and we'll, continue to keep our heads down and to continue building. We
Interesting.
personally, and also sorry, go
When
ahead.
you say 600 million, is that like for the
Yes.
liquidity or what?
Yeah, so
600 million.
combined liquidity as well as the principal tokens that people
I see.
have purchased. Yeah, so the total
Mm,
TVL actually comprises the liquidity in the AMMs as well as the PT TVL.
I
YT
see.
TVL usually isn't that substantial. Yeah, so it's mainly
I
comprising of
see.
PTs and AMM liquidity. Yeah,
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, and what the number you're looking right now is it's on mainnet, right? So I see some of the name there.
that's correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're on
Okay.
mainnet. So we have a lot of these pools that are, for example, I'll give an example like Lombard LBTC. It's a pool that gives you yield for, let's say if you purchase YTs again, if you want to get the points, then you should be purchasing YTs, right? And you see here,
Mm.
YT gives you points for Babylon, which is the equivalent of Eigenlayer for BTC. That is the easiest way that I will
Yeah.
explain it. And you have Corn, which is a new BTC L2 that is coming up, as well as Lombard, which is the LRT project itself. So you're getting three sources of points by purchasing YTs, right? The reason why there's a negative APY, in case some of you are wondering why is it like negative 100%, is because the underlying asset LBTC right now does not earn any underlying yield because Babylon yields and Babylon fees are not live. In the future, there will be yield for Babylon and Lombard, right? But as of now, most of the yield is in the form of points, which is very difficult to quantify because of the nature of airdrops, right? You don't know at the end of the day how much you're getting with the points. So again, there's again a very strong audience for YTs. In fact, myself, I do ape into YTs occasionally from time to time when I want to take a leverage bet on the points of a specific project, which I think is going to TGE, and I think maybe they might be going to do, they might be doing well, right? And I'll probably take a punt at one of this YTs.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
So you can basically choose over there, right? If you just want to
yeah,
get long on some of the part, you can just take the YT. So how would that work then? I guess you would like
oh,
oh
yeah. Let me just show you,
oh sure, yeah.
yeah, the screen.
Hmm.
So on Pendle, just to dive a little deeper into the how Pendle works, right? Maybe
Yeah,
I can bring up one of this
sure.
stablecoin pools. So Syrup USDC is essentially it's a RWA stablecoin.
Yeah.
That is Syrup USDC, the product itself, they are lending out to some crypto institutions. And currently with the YTs, you're also getting points or what they call drips from there,
Hmm.
which will eventually convert to some amount of Syrup tokens. I think you
Yeah.
had a guest
Yeah.
from Syrup come on recently. Yeah,
I
so
did. I did.
Syrup is actually a spin-off. Well, I wouldn't say the spin-off, but they were incepted by the team at Maple Finance, right? So they have obviously
Yeah.
done very well and have proven themselves in the RWA space. So yeah, we supported Syrup's pool about 1 month back. I think it's been less than a month actually. So if you look at this chart here, you will see two yield numbers. One is underlying yield and one is implied yield, right? So underlying yield is what Syrup USDC itself is actually earning, right? Implied yield is dependent on the number of people that are buying and selling PT and YT. So whenever somebody buys YT, the implied yield actually goes up. And whenever somebody buys PT, the implied yield goes down. So one way to look at it is that implied yield is the market participants' expectation or the way that they are valuing the yield or the future yield streams of Syrup USDC on Pendle, right? So this is the way to understand it. And also with PTs and YT, just to help you understand, they're actually the inverse of each other.
Hmm.
PT and YT, they make up one underlying asset. So again, just to refresh, whenever you bring a yield-bearing asset to Pendle, like for example, you bring Syrup USDC to Pendle, we will tokenize it into PT and YT, right? So PT and YT, they make up one underlying asset. On Pendle, before we actually tokenize it to PT and YT, we wrap it up into a token standard called SY or PSI. It's just a token wrapper, which is 1:1, the underlying asset, in this case, Syrup USDC, just to make it more composable and just to make it easier for us to tokenize it into PT and YT. But if I can just go to the price chart for YT over here, you see that YT trades at maybe about 3.4, 3.5 cents, right? If you
Yeah.
go to the PT chart over here, you see that, PT trades at 96 cents thereabouts. So actually, PT and YT make up one whole asset. Sorry, so
I see.
over time, towards the maturity date, and this specific pool matures in January next year, PTs will tend to one USDC on Syrup Fi, right? So it's like again a discount bond over time goes up to par value, and with YT, it is essentially a decaying asset because at maturity you no longer receive any interest, yield streams, or any points at maturity. So YT expires worthless. It is something that I think our users understand very well. But again, there are very smart traders that are also buying YTs. I'll give an example. If you scroll down here, you will be able to see users that are long yield is equivalent to purchasing YTs, right? Somebody bought in 47,000 worth of YTs, right, about 19 minutes ago, right? So yeah, so this is again, I was saying earlier that a lot of smart traders, they do purchase YTs, especially when they think it's underpriced. For example, for in the case of Syrup USDC, you look at the implied yield. If I can just go back to the previous chart,
Yeah.
implied yield is about 10%, and sorry,
Mm.
implied yield is at 15%, and underlying yield is 10%. Usually, when the implied yield is under the underlying yield, it is undervalued, right? Because underlying yield is what the actual asset is giving, but implied yield is what the yield is trading on Pendle itself. But in Stirrup's case, on top of the underlying yield of 10.26%, there is also Syrup drips, right? The points that Syrup is giving out, which will convert at the end of every month into X amount of Syrup tokens. And I think the claim happens sometime next year. But the idea is that based on, I think, the past 2 to 3 months of seasons for Syrup, and I've been having conversations with them as well, my understanding is that the drips amount to another 10 to 15%. So we're looking at really an all-in yield of maybe 20 to 25%. Again, not financial advice, but this is just
Yeah.
based on what I understand from my conversation with the Syrup team. So if you're looking at 20 to 25% all-in yield, then a 14.89 implied yield on Pendle would actually be undervalued for Syrup USDC. Yeah, so that is something that is unique about this pool. But I think, again, Pendle, the way I see it is that it's a very versatile platform. It could cater to users that want to earn passive yield on stablecoin denominated assets like usual USD 0 plus plus Syrup, right? Or even, I think one of our largest pools, just to answer your question earlier, Lam, is the Athena pool. If I can just sort it by liquidity, you
Yeah.
don't see it here, but if I go to the PT assets for Athena and I pull up specs over here, you see that there's about 400 million right now on
Wow.
PTSUSDE, which is the synthetic stable coin from Athena. In
Yeah.
case those of you that are not familiar, Athena's SUSDA earns yield from funding rate arbitrage. Essentially, they have a long spot ETH position and then they short ETH to profit from the funding rates, but essentially creating a delta neutral position so that they're not affected by the price fluctuations of ETH and purely based on the funding rates. But yeah, I think Athena has been a really good pool on Pendle as well. Obviously, you can see based on the floating PTTVL that there's a lot of interest. And one of the things that we do at Pendle as well, not I think one of my colleagues is mainly handling the DeFi integration. So we are trying to extend the utility of PT assets on other platforms like Morpho, for example, or Silo, right? They have different kinds of lending platforms that are supporting PT assets. And in fact, today, if you go onto Morpho, you will be able to see a couple of pools that are actively supporting Pendle's PT assets as collateral, and you can borrow cheap stable coins and to loop it up against.
Nice. Wow. There's
Yeah.
so many different moving parts here. So I guess like when one like trying to value
Mhm.
value the underlying you, right, versus implying you, like you said, right, they have to look deeper, right? Yeah. So it's
Yes.
not just the information on
Yes.
here.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
not it's
makes
not that
sense.
simple. Like even for the Athena pool with the
Yeah.
YTs, right? Even though the underlying yield is like 11% here, but it doesn't take into account what Athena's points are, or in their case they call it SATs, right? SATs. You don't know what
Yeah.
that SATs is going to be worth. So you really have to, like you said, do your own due diligence. Uh, Pendle Intern puts out really good content on Twitter
Yeah.
for users that are new to Pendle that want to understand more in depth about specific protocols. I think Pendle Intern is a very good source of information. Yeah, but apart
Nice.
from that, if you dig into it and you have done your research, then there's definitely a lot of opportunities for you to profit, whether it's from YTs or PTs.
I see. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah. Can you cool, cool. Can you go back to the previous page? I
Yes.
saw that you guys had a BTC Bonanza, right?
Oh
What
yes.
is that about? Yeah.
This one? Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
uh we introduced BTC assets on Pendle about 2 months back, starting
Oh,
with the yes.
oh,
So
that's a
this is the
BTC-Fi
whole
you're talking about.
that
Mm.
exactly the whole BTC-Fi campaign. And just to reiterate our stance on BTC-Fi, and both Pendle and for me myself, we believe that I think BTC-Fi has the potential to be larger than E5 if you look at it. You look at the BTC-Fi, I mean, it's like 1.2 trillion, the largest asset market cap by any token,
It
right?
is.
Today
Yeah.
is probably more. It just
Yeah.
crossed 71,000
Exactly.
at the
Yeah.
time of recording. So yeah, I think, and you look at the amount of BTC that's sitting in DeFi, it's less than 1%, right? So the potential for BTC-Fi is huge, right? It's just that you're playing a different ball game because a lot of BTC is sitting on this centralized exchanges and sexes. So a lot of BTC again controlled by, I would say, a few players that are holding a lot of them, the BTC, and the kind of risk profile that they have is different from your average ETH holder. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Cool. Cool. So if they have the deposits that exact BTC token on there, right? And I think
Oh
like
yeah.
you
So just
EBTC,
to
so BTC, and yeah.
yeah, so the cool thing about Pendle is that let's say if I'm purchasing PTE BTC, right? I don't really
Mm.
have to. Well, I don't have to start with EBTC, right? I could, for example, with Pendle, I could
Oh,
start with ETH on mainnet, right? And
I
it
see.
converts for me into X amount of right? So if let's say I purchase 100 ETH of EBTC, I will get 3.7 PTE BTC. So we offer this function. We call it zapping in. It's not a
Yeah.
new thing. I think it was started by some other DeFi protocol. But
Yeah.
on Pendle's platform and the UI, it tells you really easily that hey, if you hold this PT position until maturity, you get an ROI of 0.67% based on effective fixed APY of 4.36%. So again, just to recap, the implied APY is actually equivalent to whatever is the PT fixed rate that PT users are getting. So there's a very beautiful flywheel effect at play here. If you are starting to notice it, so whenever users buy YTs for again various reasons, whether they want to be long, yield on EBTC in this specific case, or if they want to be long, leverage long on the points that EtherFi is giving out for the specific pool, then they would
Mm.
purchase YT. And whenever people purchase YTs, implied yield goes up, and the higher the implied yields, that means that users can lock in a higher fixed yields with PT assets as well. So it's a really nice flywheel effect that I think is unique to Pendle, which is why we do try to increase the education around YT assets as well, because it's slightly more complicated than just, hey, buy PTs and you get a locked in a fixed yield if you hold it to maturity.
I see. Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, and I think the zapping function is super useful as well.
Yeah,
I
very
remember
helpful.
seeing that. Yeah, I remember seeing that back in I think in 2021, some
Mm,
DeFi Summer we had that already. But yeah, it's so helpful.
yeah.
So I guess they just is it like swapping through I don't know Uniswap or some other
Yeah,
protocol
so we use
under hood?
a Kyber aggregator for all our
Ah,
swaps, right?
Kyber. Okay.
So you can even see like for example, this transaction, if you were to start from ETH, it helps you convert it into EBTC on an external DEX, and you can see the specific price impact for every step of the process, right? So that is something that is pretty handy with Pendle's UI. It
Makes
even,
sense.
um, I think for users that want to calculate specific yield, right, you can even go to the calculator that
Nice.
is on the platform. And let's say I want to purchase, 100 ETH, right? And
Hmm.
maybe the average future APY currently is about 5%, right? So let's just put it at 5%. And you will be able to see your specific ROI. Okay, so for PTs, you're looking at APY of about 4.38%. You get an ROI of 0.67%. With
Hmm.
YTs, again, the calculation is a little more complicated because at this point, the BTC assets don't really have yield. It's mainly points that you're getting. But again, the points are very, could be quite substantial in certain cases. So that is something that you probably have to do more research into. If I can just touch on the third part of the functionality of Pendle as a user, right? You can actually provide liquidity. I'll go into the LP page in a bit, but on Pendle's platform, essentially, you can provide liquidity for these assets as well. In the case of Pendle's LP, it's actually PT against the SY asset. So earlier, if you recall, that I was sharing, if you bring a yield bearing asset to Pendle, we first wrap it into a token standard called SY before tokenizing into PT and YT. So the LP itself on Pendle comprises PT and SY. It's not PT against YT. It's actually PT and SY. But SY itself has some composition of YT, right? So the reason why it's PT and SY and not PT and YT is because when you do PT and SY, allows you to trade both PT and YT assets in a seamless manner, right? And it allows you, yeah, I'm not a super technical person, but I think when the Pendle conceptualized this mainly for the V2 version, it allows a lot of capital efficiency, right? Which is something that I think is unique to Pendle. You won't have like a huge price impact when you're trading in and out of pools as well.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I think for this to work, you still need like liquidity providers, right?
that's correct. So we
On the
usually
platform.
make sure that, like I said, we do have a process of vetting, which projects to list on Pendle, and we make sure
Mm.
that they do have a strong underlying asset TVL. If you go to, like, for example, um, for this pools page, right? So again, the third thing that you can do on Pendle, apart from providing PT and from purchasing PT and YT, is to provide liquidity if you just want to earn some yield on the asset, right? For example, if we look at maybe one of the stablecoin pools, like look at the Athena pool that is maturing in March, right? You can see the underlying asset here. It says 1.69 billion. So it tells you what the underlying asset TVL is. So we usually try to list assets that have minimally, 50 to 100 million in underlying asset TVL and have very strong secondary market liquidity. So those are the kind of criteria that we look out for when listing an asset on Pendle. Yeah,
I
and
see.
you can essentially bring in your position here, and let me see if I can bring up the chart. Yeah. So essentially with Pendle, you can see, what is the kind of APY that you will be getting from providing liquidity on, in this case, Athena SUSD, right? And on Pendle itself, we operate like, similar to what Curve does with the VE tokenomics model. So with Pendle, if you lock up Pendle tokens, right? If I can just go on to the VE Pendle page here, you can lock up Pendle tokens for a certain amount of period, and the maximum lock is 2 years. And if you lock it up, you get to boost the yield that you're getting on your LP positions as well. Yeah, maybe I'll just take a pause here.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. So basically, they would they lock the token, then they would get like more. We don't know what the multiplier, but they'll
Yeah,
get more yield, right?
that's correct.
On the YT. Cool. I see. Oh, nice. Yeah. Thanks for the walkthrough. I think that's a very I would say that could be quite overwhelming for people who are new to DeFi, right? Yeah. For people
Yeah,
like us, I think it's okay, but yeah,
yeah,
I think
yeah.
for sure. But
The
that's good.
maximum
That's
boost
good.
is actually 2.5. Um,
Oh, is it?
on the Yes, that's correct. So you get a maximum of 2.5 boost on your LP yield, specifically on the Pendle emissions as well.
I see. So if you get like
Yeah.
10% APY, does that mean you get like 25%
Oh,
or
it's
something?
not a direct translation. Uh,
Oh, okay.
it's not a direct translation, yeah, but you get a higher APY for sure compared to an unboosted position.
I
At the
see.
same time, there are also a couple of protocols or liquid blockers that are developing on top of Pendle, similar to
Hmm.
what Curve and Convex has, right? So in Pendle's
Yeah.
case, we have PenPy and Equilibria that are building on top of Pendle. And the idea is that you can take your LP positions from Pendle to those protocols and deposit there,
Hmm.
and then you get the boosted yields instead of having to lock up your own Pendle tokens, because those protocols themselves, they hold quite some Pendle tokens. So by default, your position is boosted.
I see. Cool.
Yeah,
So right now, Pendle, I mean your token, I know it's been like live for quite some time, and many other protocols also holding it, right? So I guess like many other big protocols are also like depositing their yield into that, right? Or
yeah,
their token into your platform, right? And then to get yield for
yeah.
in return, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we
Interesting.
do have a lot of
Okay.
DAOs, institutions, funds, DeFi funds that are deploying mainly into PT strategies, I would say.
Yeah.
I have heard of one or two funds that are deploying on YTs, but that's a very, I would say for an institutional fund, it's more of a high risk play because YT is again a decaying asset. So you're essentially
Yeah.
making a bet that the points and the yield that you're getting from YT is going to be worth more than the value of the YT that you're purchasing today.
That makes sense. Would you say if you could give a number, what percentage would you say like more for like geared toward like businesses using Pendle and then also like
Yeah,
for individual user?
I think I would say actually 50% of our
Okay, so
users are
it's even.
institutional users. Yeah,
Hmm.
it could actually be more than 50%. Based on what we know and what if we have tracked, it's about 40 to 50%, but there is a good number of them that are not tracked. So I think the real number could be higher than 50.
Nice, cool. Interesting. Yeah, I think I would thought that like more of the big companies or institution would be using your platform.
Yes.
as a per individual. But yeah, that's good to know. So yeah, let's actually just quickly. I'm curious about like, can you share a bit more about the team behind Pendle Finance? Like, how many people in your company?
Yeah, so I'm based in the Singapore team, right? Most of our
Mm,
devs are based in Vietnam.
mm,
Our core team has about, oh, we don't, I wouldn't say core team, but I think the team based in Singapore is about 15 people,
mm,
and then 20 devs based in Vietnam. Our CTO himself is Vietnamese, but he sits in Singapore. Really experienced guy. He was the one that conceptualized the whole PTYTSY thing with Pendle. So yeah, that's the main um, distribution of the team. For the BD ecosystem team, it's about 5 people, including myself. We
mm.
have one person, as I was saying earlier, looking specifically at external integration. So, how do you
Yeah.
have PT supported as collateral on different money markets such as Morpho and Silo? We have TN himself, who's also more involved on the BD side of things. TN is our co-founder and CEO, so he's mainly involved in that. And we have Ken, who's heading up the institutions as well. And myself and Anton, Anton himself is also one of the OGs in Pendle. They used to be from Kyber Swap together with TN. So there were about, I would say, 3 or 4 guys in Pendle that were originally from Kyber's team. So yeah, that was the whole setup of the team. But yeah, I think overall, actually, just to share a fun fact, I just joined Pendle this year, right? I've known
Mm,
about Pendle for quite a while, but I only had the chance to join them this year. But
nice.
yeah, honestly, it's been an amazing experience. Like I feel like I'm in. Sometimes I feel like I'm an all-star football team, right? When everybody is so good at what they're doing. The tech guys are really good at what they're doing. The devs are insanely smart. The guys in product team, marketing team, huge credit to them as well for the whole UI UX flow has gone through so many iterations, right? Just to make the whole user experience and flow more seamless on Pendle.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I think that many people probably outside Web3 probably don't realize like how much work actually go into building a
Yeah,
fully fledged product that's very seamless and easy to use for user, right? But
yeah,
also I see one thing you guys done really well is like you have a lot of these explainer, right? Calculator, maybe simple graph things that are easier for people to understand, I would say. Yeah,
yeah.
so I think that's good. So who would you consider like to be the competitors, or maybe or maybe other protocols like doing similar things or in the same
Yeah,
vein?
I've heard of 1 or 2 of them, but I don't remember the name. But I think when
Mm,
it comes to yield tokenization and DeFi, Pendle is probably 99% of the market, if not close to 100%. So I would say we are fortunate because we have essentially dominance and monopoly of the whole. I wouldn't say monopoly. It sounds like a very non Web3 decentralized word to use. But yeah, we have a huge market dominance when it comes to the yield tokenization or the yield trading space. A lot of DeFi protocols, in fact, a lot of the DeFi protocols that are working on yield bearing assets, a lot of them want to work with Pendle, and we
mm,
do have a long list of assets that are queued up. I think every week we have an average of like 2 to 3 assets that we're listing on Pendle. We are
nice.
also looking to expand into Binance chain strategy soon to push DeFi on Binance. Pendle is currently deployed on 5 chains. So we're on
Yeah.
Ethereum, we're on Arbitrum, we're on Optimism, we're on Mantle, and we're also on Binance. So these are the 5 chains for now. No immediate plans to expand to any other L1 and L2s, but that might change that might change in the next few months. Yeah,
Cool. Interesting. But then, yeah, I think it could kind of make sense, right? But I guess it makes sense to just go where the main liquidity is, right? So if there's
yeah,
like a new chain where there's a lot of liquidity, then I guess you guys probably would come over at that time, right? Hmm.
that's true. Which is why
Interesting.
we're
Yeah.
mainly still focused on ETH for now.
Yeah, for sure. I think for a lot of the main DeFi, right, Ethereum is still
Yeah,
one of the big one. Yeah, as well. So what do you say like some of the main challenges or hurdles facing your team, whether it's like
yeah.
technical or business? Yeah.
I think on more on the external side of things, right? Like you rightfully pointed out that we have a lot of these explainers, and I think our growth and education team, community education team has done a very good job in terms of putting out very good materials around educating users about how do you go about using Pendle. For the very reason that Pendle itself is quite a complicated product to use and understand, even for some sophisticated DeFi users, there is a learning curve to be honest, right? Understanding the whole implied APY, underlying APY thing, the decaying value of YTs and with PT assets. I think, well, yeah, there is some learning curve to it. which is why we focus a lot on community education and trying to create resources that are intuitive for users to understand. So that is one of the, I wouldn't say challenge, but one of the things that we prioritize a lot, which is to educate our users about the how Pendle works, as well as the new assets that we list, whether it's the recent RWA protocols or the BTC-Fi pools on Pendle. We push out a lot of educational materials around that. I think another thing that is something that we do prioritize quite a bit, and I was just having a conversation with a friend yesterday, is security, right? When it comes to DeFi protocols in general, I think you can't get away from the topic of security. There is always a chance of smart contract risk, right? So that is something that I think the Pendle team, especially the engineering team at Pendle, does really well. We have weekly, internal calls just to review incidents in the space, whether it's exploits that are happening with certain protocols, whether it's social engineering or smart contract exploits. I think the Pendle team takes it very seriously, especially when you're talking about a protocol that's having close to 3 billion in TVL. So that is something that we place a lot of emphasis on. And I'm very assured to know that the team at Pendle does take into account different measures to make sure that we are not victims of such an exploit.
Yeah, for sure.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, for
Fingers
sure.
crossed.
I think like
Yeah.
security hack or security incident in Web3 now just becomes so commonplace that just every other week you would hear about like a new protocol got hacked or like new maybe multi-sig or something got hacked, right? And then,
Yeah.
there's so many different angle attacks these days that it's quite hard to protect yourself. But I think also like social engineering is one of the tricky one,
Yes.
right? Like I think
Yeah.
that's actually the tricky one. I think
The
that's the one
recent
that took down. I
exploit
think.
with Radiant, I'm not sure if you've heard of that.
Oh yeah, I heard of that too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was more of
yeah.
people are saying it's a social engineering thing. Yeah. So again, like especially when it comes to your multi-sig signatories, I think the guys that are the multi-sig signatories of Pendle, they take security very seriously. Even going to measures such as having separate device altogether just for sign-in transactions. That is something that I think helps with alleviating or minimizing the risk of being victims of social engineering.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we're also hoping that as well too, and hoping maybe many more future companies that also would help to prevent a lot of these hacks and security. But cool. So looking into the future, I'm curious. Maybe just a general question about DeFi and BTC-Fi. Like, so how will BTC-Fi in particular, and then DeFi in general, evolve in like the next few years, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think going back to BTC-Fi, I think why it's interesting is because we were discussing earlier, Love, that the real yield on BTC staking is 0%. Real yield meaning BTC itself is proof of work. You cannot stake BTC, unlike ETH. ETH you can stake it for 3% thereabouts to validate the network. But for BTC you can't be staking it, right? The main yield comes from things like using it as collateral to borrow against on platforms like Aave, but even then the yield is very minimal and negligible, which is why I think Pendle is trying to innovate this whole thing by providing, for the first time in DeFi, fixed yield denominated in a BTC asset. So if you're a BTC institution or BTC fund, or let's say you're somebody who's holding a huge amount of BTC and you want to earn passive yields on BTC, right? You can do that with Pendle, right? At the end of the day, let's say if you're getting BT assets at 5% implied yield, you will be getting 5% more BTC, assuming it's a 1 year pool, right? If it's not a 1 year pool, then it'll be prorated. But yeah, so that is, I think, something that I think is really innovative for the space. And of course, what's coming up next is Pendle V3. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but essentially Pendle V3 will solve a lot of the capital inefficiencies that we're seeing with Pendle V2 today. Even though I would say that Pendle V2 today is very efficient already, users can enter, exit, sizes of a few millions with minimal price impact on Pendle V2 today. But V3 will introduce leverage trading. Like think of it like a futures platform for yield trading. And the possibilities are endless, right? I think with RWA, we unlock a new paradigm with Pendle. For the first time, Pendle is not just all about DeFi yields, right? You can access real world yields that are through, Syrup USDC or through usual USD 0++ that is backed by, US Treasury bills. So any kind of yield markets, whether it's DeFi or TradFi, can be traded, right? In the future, perhaps they could even be, Forex yields or some other yields that you could trade. Yeah, so that is something that we are looking to explore more of in Pendle V3, as well as the ability to margin trade on yields.
Interesting, and I think this is probably like in your area of expertise, right? Working in RWA, you said like bridging, I don't know, bridging like real assets, like
Yeah.
yeah, on chains as well. So I think like I mean you probably also seen one of my episode previously about Maple
Hmm.
Finance syrup, right? I think what a lot of they doing is like actually bringing a lot of the real world view per se on
Yeah.
chain, right? So I'm gonna leave a link
Yep.
to that episode here if you want to check it. Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation. Another DeFi side, cool. Yeah, so just two more questions before we close down the
Yeah.
show. Do you have any advice if you want to break into Web3? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the best way to get started into Web3 is to dip your feet into the water. Honestly, I think it's the best way to do it. But at the same time, I think a lot of Web3 DeFi projects, even though they may not have the best UX and UI, as a new user, you'll be like, what the heck is this UX or UI? It looks like a platform that's like a scam, right? But I think there is a bit of getting used to that. But at the same time, a lot of these DeFi projects have put out very good materials around the white papers and the docs in terms of getting to know how to use the platform. I would say understand the different categories in DeFi, right? When you talk about DEX trading, right, you think about Uniswap. You talk about money markets and lending, borrowing. You think about Aave, right? Hopefully
Yeah.
when you think about yield, you think about Pendle. So the idea is to get your feet wet with I would say this category leaders when it comes to the different verticals in DeFi. And then once you're familiar with, for example, once you know how to use Aave and the category of lending, then you can use essentially any other money market because they're more or less, I would say, similar to each other, right? So that you get familiar with that. I think the other thing that is important to practice or to understand is wallet hygiene. So how you practice
Mm.
good wallet hygiene in terms of not signing malicious transactions, trying to check and understand what you're signing to make sure that it's not it's not a fake phishing link or some social engineering that you're falling into. Yeah, these are the things that I would say to place more emphasis on. But apart from that, I think the best way to learn is really just to get your feedback.
Yeah, it's true. I completely agree with that. Yeah, but I mean, I think for the part about like wallet hygiene, I think that one may be harder. I feel like especially for any new user to DeFi, right, it might be a bit
Yeah.
overwhelming, like not signing. It speaks to you about like wallet transaction, like understanding if person doesn't have technical background, even trying to understand like what the signature mean. Sometimes it's actually quite complicated, to be honest. I mean, even for me, I've been working in the field of Web3. Like sometimes you actually have to look it up. You have to go through like multiple hoops and steps if you really want to find out what like do you want to do that now, or like are you gonna wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes, look it up, and then yeah. But I think another guest on my podcast also said you are most vulnerable when like your mind is not thinking clearly, right?
Mm.
Like when you're tired or when you like just just finish something,
Don't
you're
don't sign
sleepy.
any
Exactly,
transactions. Yeah.
exactly. Don't sign a transaction. Yeah, that'll probably be like the worst side transaction when you're sleepy. Cool. And
Yeah. And
final
also
question.
to use cold
Oh
wallets, right? I think, sorry, just to add on to that, I think
yeah.
also really important to be looking at things like co-wallet ledgers, right? When you're storing your funds. I've read a couple of threads on wallet hygiene, and some people advocate having multiple wallets for different purposes, right? So you have one wallet that is essentially your hot wallet, right? It could be MetaMask, it could be a wallet that you use exclusively for signing transactions with DeFi protocols. You're not supposed to keep your bankroll there, right? Most of your funds and the bulk of your bag should be held in a cold wallet or ledger device where essentially you need to physically click on the device to approve a transaction, right? And that does not interact with any external D apps, right? You're only supposed to send funds from your ledger cold wallet to the hot wallet that is used to interact with external D apps. So you have an additional layer of security there. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think yeah, hardware wallet is probably like the king at this point when it comes to security, right? Because I mean, I guess the only way this person can hack or get it is like get the physical wallet, right?
Yeah.
Which is in your hand. Yeah, exactly. Actually, talking about that, I'm gonna leave another link up here too
Yeah.
for episode 47. I actually interviewed the founder of Ronin Wallet. He's actually building like a hardware wallet here based in Japan. Well, he's based in Japan. His team is global as well. So if that people might find that interesting as well. Cool. Yeah. Thanks for that. And final question: where can people follow you and your company? Feel free to share any username
Yeah.
or
So
handles.
maybe I can. Is there? Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a chat,
you
right?
can yeah you can chat, or you can just say it out loud, and then I will put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah,
Whichever way works.
follow us on Pendle Finance, right? At Pendle. Let me just put the link here. Again, be careful when you're checking the links because there are a couple of impersonators on Twitter itself for Pendle. Um, so I think it's really important to double check your links when you're. Let me just share the links here at Pendle Fi.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so usually before I put any links on here, I usually triple check and also try to
Yeah,
open the link
I'm
myself as well
also
to make sure,
trying
yeah,
to make
before,
sure that it's the correct
yeah,
link
and
because
it's
yeah, it's a huge risk.
legitimate and everything. Okay. Mm.
Yeah. So that's Pendle. You can follow me on Wilbert for occasionally I have some commentary on a couple of new pools that we're building on Pendle. Specific areas of interest for now are mainly around RWA and BTC-Fi. Yeah, do follow us on our socials and our CT.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, so I'm gonna put all the links in the show notes for people to follow you as well on Twitter, X, and then your website as well too. Yeah, so that people can follow you. Wilbert, thank you so much for joining the show today. It's been a lot of fun talking about DeFi and Pendle with you. And for everyone watching, please keep in mind that this show is just for educational and entertainment. Not everything that's said here is financial advice, and the opinion is just of the author and also myself. So, well, once again, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, love.
Cool. And we're back to my studio. What do you guys think about this episode with Wilbert, BD expert at Pendle Finance? Since they are currently the market leader when it comes to trading yield, I would consider Pendle as one of the DeFi giants. If you have tried out the V2 platform, please share your experience below. For the next episode, we'll be talking to David. He's the managing director for Tezos APAC. Tezos is an open source platform for assets and applications that can evolve by upgrading itself. Tezos is also one of the original layer 1 proof of stake blockchains that is helping the industry transition to more energy efficient method. If you enjoyed this episode, please give a like and subscribe. Mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching and see you next time.